This is chapter 7, verses 11 and 12. No, it's not. It's just verse 11 that I've just recited. And its English translation is, "And we indeed created you, then fashioned you. Then we said to the angels, make submission to Adam. So they submitted except Iblis. He was not of those who submitted." I have recited this verse of the Holy Quran because I was thinking about creation and the story of man as given in the Holy Quran and in the Old Testament, and also the theory of evolution of species. And something struck me, which was this. You see, Christianity is blown a deadly blow to its theology by Darwin's theory of evolution. And it actually supports Islam. And I say this because if you look at Christian theology, it says God created man in his image. Now, the theory of evolution clearly debunks that, because it says that what happened was that species gradually evolved from a lower state into a higher state until eventually they developed a consciousness and then became human beings as we know them. God says in the Holy Quran, God is Rabbul Alameen. He is the Lord of all creation, all the universes. Now, Rabb means someone who creates in the first instance. He then nourishes his creation, and then through small stages he perfects his creation, which is supported by the theory of evolution. Again, Christian theology tells us that God created one man and one woman, and that one man sinned, he made a mistake, he had been created to live forever like God or the angels, and the punishment of his fall from grace was the fact that he would now die. And then, because man could not recompense for Adam's sin or Adam's and Eve's sin, God had to send his own son and put him on the cross and kill him to redeem for our sins. But theory of evolution, of course, debunks all of that. If humankind developed through stages, then there was no one man and one woman who committed this sin. If there wasn't a man and a woman who committed this sin, then the idea of cardinal sin or the original sin, that dies. If there was no cardinal sin or original sin, then there was no need for God to send his own son on this earth to die on the cross, to bear the burden of the sins of humanity. So this theory totally debunks Christian theology in its entirety by saying that man got here through an evolution of species which were created on this earth. And this is why the fundamentalist Christians and even others, particularly in the United States, are so against teaching of theory of evolution in their schools and in their colleges. Some time ago, there was a professor at a Christian college. College was called Wheaton College. Well, I say some time ago, I think it was 1961. And he wrote an article in the university paper describing the theory of evolution. And there was uproar. Someone started a newspaper against this professor, and the newspaper was called The Sword of God. And there was so much pressure that in this land of freedom of belief and expression, Wheaton College had to call in all their professors and ask them to sign a declaration of oath saying that they did not believe in theory of evolution and they would not teach theory of evolution. So much for independent, open inquiry without any restrictions. But you see, what surprised me was this, that Muslims are even more opposed to teaching of theory of evolution. And that surprises me. A theory that supports them, their vision, their concept of God, their concept of creation of man, a theory that totally debunks Christian theology, and the people whose theology it supports, they oppose it. Turkey, in January this year, when it banned various websites, banned all sites that mentioned the word evolution, which really is silly because evolution is all around us. You have a baby who's born, who's tiny, can't walk, can't do anything, learns to crawl, learns to walk, learns to talk, grows up. Well, that's evolution. A change is taking place in that baby as the years pass. But that is a slightly different story and an issue. So I started to look into how the theory of evolution of species, how and where it originated. And I stumbled upon something which I want to read to you. I've listed these here. And these are the achievements of early Muslim philosophers. They were the first ones who said that there should be a citation for what you say. Asnad. You can't just say things. Oh, this is this. How do you know? How do you support what you say? And then the next development was the development of the concept of ijtihad. And that is application of your own intellect to understanding of problems and of possible solutions to those problems. Muslims were the first one to recognize that science and philosophy have moral implications. This concept did not develop in the West for hundreds of years, and really it wasn't until the First World War that it took formal form, that you cannot make gas and then drop it in battlefields and kill people. Muslims were, interestingly, the first ones to separate theology, the Kalam, and law, the Sharia. Theology, the Kalam, the revelation remained the same, but Sharia was developed. We know that there were four famous, apart from the Shia ones, Sunni schools of jurisprudence: Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali. And although they all referred to the Holy Quran, so the theology was the same, but Sharia that they developed was different. Again, the distinction between religion and philosophy, which marked the beginning of secular thought, came with Islam. The beginning of a peer review process, that started with Islam. So what happens is, at a higher level, at an advanced level, when you write a paper in whatever it is, physics, chemistry, history, archaeology, it is then peer reviewed. Your peers, people who are experts in the same field, they look at it and criticize it and discuss it. And early ideas on beginning of the scientific method, and interestingly, the early ideas on the theory of evolution were put forward by Muslims. As I started off by talking about Asnad, citation of where people get their information from, the first person who came up with this was Al-Jahiz, and he was the first person to mention the theory of evolution. He died in 869 CE. And he wrote a book called The Book of Animals, and in that he said, animals engage in a struggle for existence, for resources, to avoid being eaten and to breed. Environmental factors influence organisms to develop new characteristics to ensure survival, thus transforming into new species. What does the theory of evolution say? Animals that survive to breed can pass on their successful characteristics to their offspring. He said this. He was born in 1776, so it was God knows how many hundreds of years ago that he said that. A very well-known scientist who was called Abu Rehan, is also known more commonly as Al-Biruni. When he was discussing the Mahabharata, I am not referring to the weekly installments of the same name on Zee Television, on Sky TV. I am actually referring to the original battle that took place in India between the two clans that were living there. He attempted to give a naturalistic explanation as to why the struggles described in Mahabharata had to take place. He explains it using natural processes that include biological ideas related to evolution, which has led several scholars to compare his ideas to Darwinism and natural selection. This is due to Biruni's describing the idea of artificial selection and then applying it to nature. Al-Biruni said, the agriculturist selects his corn, letting grow as much as he requires and tearing out the remainder. The forester leaves those branches which he perceives to be excellent, while he cuts away all the others. The bees kill those of their kind who only eat. The bees kill those of their kind who only eat but do not work in their beehive. Nature proceeds in a similar way. However, it does not distinguish, for its actions is under all circumstances one and the same. It allows the leaves and fruit of the trees to perish, thus preventing them from realizing that result which they are intended to produce in the economy of nature. It removes them so as to make room for others. The same idea as species, and as you know, trees and plants are living organisms. 13th century, Nasruddin Tusi explained how the elements evolved into minerals, then plants, then animals, and then humans. He said, the organisms that can gain the new features faster are more variable. As a result, they gain advantage over other creatures. The bodies are changing as a result of the internal and external interactions. He then went on to say, look at the world of animals and birds. They have all that is necessary for defense, protection, and daily life, including strength, courage, and appropriate tools. He means organs. Because he then goes on to say, some of these organs are real weapons. For example, horns, spear, teeth, claw knife and needle, feet, and hoof cudgel. The thorns and needles of some animals are similar to arrows. Animals that have no other means of defense protect themselves with the help of flight and cunning. Some of them, for example, bees, ants, and some bird species have united in communities in order to protect themselves and help each other. He then goes on to say, such humans live in the Western Sudan, that humans developed in the same way, and other distant corners of the world. They are close to animals by their habits and deeds and behavior. The human has features that distinguishes him from other creatures, but he has other features that unite him with the animal world, vegetable kingdom, and even the inanimate bodies. But we are talking about transmutation of species. And in this, the most, how shall I say, not well-known, authoritative voice was that of Al-Dinavari, who was considered the founder of botany. And he wrote a book called The Book of Plants. If you look at these, all these books that they used to write used to be the book of animals, plants, and so on. And he was then followed by Ibn Miskawaya, I think his name is pronounced, and he wrote a book called Brethren of Purity. And in that he said, these books state that God first created matter and invested it with energy for development. Matter therefore adopted the form of vapor, which assumed the shape of water in due time. What's the current theory? How do planets come into being? They start off in a gaseous state and then develop water, which is why when scientists and satellites and probes go anywhere, to any new planet, what do they look for? Traces of water. So that's the first thing. And he's saying this hundreds of years ago, that gas first turns into water with the passage of time. The next stage of development was mineral life. Different kinds of stones developed in the course of time. Their highest form being mirjan or coral. It's a stone which has in it branches like those of a tree. Those who've seen pictures or videos of coral reef would know what he's describing. Or after mineral life evolves vegetation. The evolution of vegetation culminates with a tree which bears the qualities of an animal. This is the date palm. It has male and female genders. It does not wither if all its branches are chopped, but it only dies when its head is cut off. The date palm is therefore considered the highest form amongst the trees and resembles the lowest among the animals. Then is born the lowest of animals. It evolves into an ape. This is not the statement of Darwin that I am reading here. This is our Muslim ancestor saying this hundreds of years ago. And he went on to say that ape then evolved into a lower kind of a barbarian man. He then became a superior human being. And he was then endowed with consciousness, and from then on, man can become a saint or a prophet. He evolves into higher stages and can go further on and become an angel. And Muslim Sufis then develop different stages. You have Finafi Sheikh, which is the next higher spiritual state of a human being, and Finafi Rasul and Finafillah, and so on and so forth. Now, what I want to show you is this, that for some reason we always look at these things and we think that they've all been invented, and this is a frequent chant to destroy our faith, to take Muslims away from Islam and so on. And yet hundreds of years ago, Muslims were putting forward ideas which we see coming to sort of fulfillment now. I'm not saying that Darwin and other people actually depended on these writings, although some people actually say, I think in Cambridge somewhere, there is a monograph on the fact that Darwin may actually have been impressed by this particular book and triggered ideas in his head. They may have come up with these ideas, Western scientists and philosophers, completely independently. But the point that I'm making is this, that Muslims were discussing and debating these ideas hundreds of years ago, without any problem with authority, without any problem with anyone, without anyone's faith becoming endangered, etc., etc., etc. But I go back to the point with which I originally started, and that is the fact that I'm puzzled. I'm puzzled by the fact that a theory is opposed by Muslims while it completely demolishes Christian theology. If evolution is true, then there is no original sin. If there is no original, if evolution is true, then God did not create man in his own image. If evolution is true, then there is no original sin. If there is no original sin, then God does not need to send anyone to die on the cross to compensate for that original sin. What is left of Christianity? What then is left of Christianity after this? Nothing. And Muslims, rather than do research and promote this and show how this theory supports Islam, because its very concept of the Creator, and in the verse that I read out, what did God say? I created you. That's the first step, theory of evolution. I fashioned you. Second step, theory of evolution. And then said to the angels, so after I had created and fashioned you, then said to the angels, obey Adam. What does that mean? I gave Adam consciousness, intellect, power of thinking, so that the whole of universe would bow down at Adam's feet. So I think sometimes we're too hasty in rushing to judgment on these things without properly reflecting upon them. And perhaps that is also a reflection about the state and lack of education and debate and discussion in our societies and those countries where Muslims are in a majority.